Today we're going to solve May June 2023 paper 2-2, which has one of the most technical 15-mark questions so far till date. And the main complication lies here with the fact that we had to write procedures and functions for this. So if you do not know this topic, it might be a little confusing, but I'll try my best to explain it as we go along. So first of all, we have a 2D array called account, which contains account holder names and passwords for a banking program. So we'll highlight as we go along. Then 2D array account details has three columns which contains the following details. So column 1 stores the balance, the amount of money. Then column 2 stores the overdraft limit, the maximum total amount an account holder can borrow from the bank after the account balance reaches zero. Okay, so this is essentially taking some sort of loan from the bank. Okay, so if you have no balance in the account, you can take a loan from the bank, but it can only be till a certain extent. It is capped. Okay, so you cannot go beyond this overdraft limit for each account. And column 3 stores the withdrawal limit. So this is the maximum amount of money that you can withdraw from your own account. For example, 200, 300, 500, and also keeping overdraft in mind. So let's say if you are within the overdraft limit, but you are exceeding the withdrawal limit, then that is also an invalid transaction. The amount of money in a bank account can be negative, but not by more than the overdraft limit. Okay, so as I said before, if the account limit is 100, the overdraft limit is 100, then you cannot exceed by more than minus 100. So why is it minus 100? Because it will only be given when the balance is equal to zero. So since you took a loan from the bank of, let's say, $50, so this becomes minus 50. This is the basic math that you have to keep in mind. So if the overdraft limit is $100, so you cannot borrow 101 from the bank or 102 or 200. It has to be any value between or up to till 100. Suitable error messages must be displayed if a withdrawal cannot take place. For example, if the overdraft limit or the size of the withdrawal is exceeded. Okay, so as I said, you cannot withdraw more than the limit, and also you cannot take more loan than the overdraft limit. And then the bank ID gives the index of each account holder data in two arrays. For example, account IDs 20s would be held in 21, 20, and 2, 21, 22, 23. Okay, in the same row there would be multiple columns having the same details of the same person. Variable size contains the name of the account, and the size has already been set up. So this is a very wordy question. So far we have gathered all the details. Now it's telling us what we have to do. Write a program that will check the account ID exists and the name and the password entered matches the one stored in the account 1D array. Okay, so first of all, we will visualize this part, and I've already visualized it for convenience. So here we have a 2D array called account where we have names of some people and the password stored, which is never stored in plain text, but always some sort of hashing algorithm is used, but just for the sake of this example. And then we have another array called account details, which has three columns that we saw earlier, which has balance, overdraft, and withdrawal. So here we have the balance in column 1, the overdraft, and then the withdrawal limit. Okay, so technically these are the column 1 and 2, and then 1, 2, and 3. But we have named them for our convenience and ease. So let me put them up front like this. And as the question said before, that the rows contain the same synchronized data. So when we talk about 20th row of the account, or we talk about, let's say, the second row of this Tony Stark, this is the password, this is his balance, overdraft limit, and withdrawal limit. Similarly, when we have Wanda, here we have her password, balance, overdraft limit, all stored in the same row across two arrays. Okay, so first of all, we have to validate the input of the password and the username, and both of them need to be correct, both of them. Okay, then it says display a menu showing the four actions available for the account holder to choose from: display, withdraw, deposit, and exit. Okay, so what is this exit suggesting? First, we have to make sure that we understand what this is. Basically, we have to loop until user decides to exit the program. Okay, so that means that we'll put the whole program inside some sort of a while loop or a repeat until loop. It cannot be inside in an iterative loop. Okay, cannot be a for loop because we don't know when user will exit. So this is very important that we keep that in mind. Then allows an action to be chosen and completed. Each action is to be completed by a procedure with a parameter of the account ID. Okay, so this was quite an extensive statement. Now we need to know what procedures and functions are. I'll give a very quick overview. We cannot go into much detail in this for the specific problem. So procedure is basically reusable block of code. That's it. Okay, so you can write code, and then if you want to use it again and again, you just pass it as a procedure or a function, and then it can take parameters which will affect the behavior of program. An example being, let's say if we have a calculator, so calculator is the procedure, and then the parameters in our case would be the operand 1, then the operator, and then the operand 2. These are the values that calculator cannot operate without. And then we'll be writing the pseudocode for this. Okay, so let's begin. First of all, we will actually need to come up with the menu, then the names of the procedures, and then we will start defining those procedures at the top. So first we always define, and then we always consume the procedures. We'll do the simple part first and the complicated part later on. So first of all, we need to ask the user to input their account ID, and this would be what we can call our main program. And the part above this would all be procedures and functions. If we end up making a function, I'll explain as we go along. Okay, so the first part says that you need to check the account ID from the user and if it is appropriate or not. So output, enter account ID, and then since we need to validate it, it has to be inside a conditional loop. So account ID and the name. So we know from the fact that account IDs are basically the row numbers and they are dictated by the size variable. Size is given to us. It contains the number of accounts. So the same logic applies here, row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way till size, like this, in both the arrays. So we need to loop until we make sure that the account ID that the user inputs is between 1 to size. In our case, let's assume the size is 10. So the row number is basically the account ID. So repeat until in fact, let's first take the input, output, enter account ID, and then input account ID so we keep repeating this until account ID is greater than equal to 1 and account ID is less than equal to size. Okay, so we make sure that we only check the account IDs that are within the specified limit, not outside. Okay, once this is done, then we need to ask the user to input their password and then we can check if they are a part of the system or not. So we need to have some sort of login mechanism. So here we can call the login procedure. Again, we have not made it yet, we'll make it in a bit. Calling login. So we can maybe call it status login account ID. This is all of our main program, by the way. So this login is not defined yet. This is supposed to be a procedure, a function. We'll see. In our case, we'll make it as a function because we want to return some value from the login so that we can use it to start the program. Like only once the user is logged in, then we can show them this menu, display, withdraw, deposit, and exit. Otherwise, since they're not authenticated, they shouldn't be able to see any of this. So let's say if the status is returned as true, it means the login was successful. Then we can show the user the menu. So we can either leave it like this, or if you want, you can also write is equal to true. Both of them mean the same thing. So if it returns true, then we want to repeat until, again, we will keep asking the user to input the values until they choose 4, that is exit. So that could be until maybe choice is equal to 4, and then we'll ask the user to input their choice. So output, enter 1 to display balance, then 2, then 3, then 4. So 4 would be to exit, 3 would be to deposit money, and 2 would be to withdraw money. That is what they said, display, deposit, withdraw. Okay, this is good. And then we ask them to input the choice. So input choice like this. And once they input the choice, if it is not equal to 4, this process will keep on repeating. Every time they will make a choice, and then based on that, we will call the appropriate subroutine, function, procedure, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so if choice is equal to 1, then else if choice is equal to 2, then else if choice is equal to 3, and 4 is not needed because this is the terminating condition. Okay, if choice is equal to 1, we have to display the balance. So for that, we will call our module display, and we need to send an account ID. Okay, why is that so? The question here clearly states that each action is to be completed by a procedure with the parameter of the account ID. That means you need to send in the value of the account ID every time you use this module. Without it, it will not work. And which makes sense. Basically, you are telling the module that this is the account ID of a certain user which we have to use to do the processing. So here we are just calling the display module which we yet have to write, and account ID was inputted by the user earlier. Then if choice is 2, then we'll call our module withdraw account ID. And if choice is 3, since it's deposit, so let's call it deposit based on a certain account ID, and that's it, and we end it. Okay, so far this is only inputting, outputting, nothing else. Now we have 3 function calls, module calls here, not function calls. This is the function that we have to make. We have 3 module calls so far, so we need to go and define them now. Let's start with the easiest one, that is the display. Then maybe we can move towards deposit, etc. Okay, so display, let's define display. Okay, so as per the pseudocode guide, which is again the most important document that we have, if we go here and we look at the procedure and the function, how they're written, so we'll be using the same syntax, this one. So this is how you define a procedure, and you use the call keyword to call it, and then you have the function. So function is a bit different. It uses the return keyword because it will literally return a value from its body back to the line it was called from. So procedures and functions that we're defining it. So defining, all right. So first of all, we have procedure display account ID, which is being passed as an integer, and then we have the end procedure. Okay, in this, what we have to do is we just have to display the balance. And as it was stated in the question, that the balance is stored in the first column of the account details array. And account ID is actually the row number, right? So let's say if the user inputs account ID is 3, so this is their row number, account ID 3, that is Harry Potter. And if we go to account details first column, it will give us their balance, which is minus 150. So we just need to do that. We will say output your current balance is account details index account ID comma 1. Okay, again this is the array that is given to us. This is the column 1, and we need the row number and which we got from the user, that the user inputted earlier. Okay, so this is how we get the account ID. Again, let's look at the flow. Here the user inputs the account ID that we validated, and then we go till all the way to line 28. Here we have the display procedure. We need try call as written in the pseudocode guide. So we from here we copy the account ID. Let's say it was 3. So we go to display. This is how display is defined. And in account ID, 3 would be copied. So this would literally mean go to account details, third row, first column. This is third row, first column of account details, which is minus 150. This is how it's going to work. Alright, so this is your display procedure. Then the next part says we have to make one for deposit and one for withdraw. So withdraw is a bit tricky, so will be doing it at the end. Let's do login first. We haven't done login yet. So login is another procedure that we have to okay, this is a function now. The reason we're making it a function is because we need some sort of status update whether the user is authenticated or not. So function allows you to bring a value from within the function's body back into the line it was called from, whereas procedure cannot do that. Procedure only performs a set of steps and then it stops, terminates, whereas function has the ability to bring the value or multiple values back into from itself into the main program that is outside of its body or outside of its scope. So let's define login as function, and we need to pass in the account ID, and then we need to check if this account ID is actually part of the system or not. So let's do that. So we'll call it a function login account ID, again as integer, and then we have the end function. Again, this is all given in the pseudocode guide. Okay, so we will ask them to input their name, then input their password as the question stated above. You need to ask for both things and they must match for them to log in into the system. Output enter account name, input account name, let's say, then output enter account password, and then input account password. Let's call it password. Okay, so they've inputted both things. Now we need to make sure that they are correct. How do we make sure of that? So name is in the first column of the account array and password is in the second column of the account array. So we need to get the account ID that is in the the row number, and then the column number would be 2. This would get us the password, and then the row number in column number 1 would get us the username. So username, and then this is the password corresponding to the row. So we can actually save them in variables, substitute them, so we don't have to rewrite them over and over again. So let's do that first. This is just for our ease. You don't need to do this, it's not compulsory. So maybe we can say username is equal to account. So in the account array they are stored in the first column, the username. So account ID comma 1. Where did I get this account ID from? Again, this is being passed from the main program. Whatever the user entered as their account ID is passed into the login and it is copied here. So I'm saying that whatever the account ID is or whatever the row number is, get the first column value, that is, let's say in our case, Tony Stark. And then in order to get their password, let's call it password account. So we get their account ID that they inputted and the second column which will give us their password. In our case, that would be Ironman01. Now we just need to check if they both match or not. So if the username is equal to the account name that the user inputted earlier and the password is equal to the password that the user entered. Okay, so we're just checking that the password in the system versus the password that the user entered and the username, are they both same or not? If that is the case, now since we can return a value in a function and we are using it here in fact status, so we need to set the status to some value. In our case it should be true, so we can use it further, and only then it will print out the whole menu. If that is the case, then we set status to true and we can maybe output some sort of message, welcome to your account. Else, if that is not the case, if the system cannot find any authenticated user, and we'll set status to false, and we can output you are not authenticated, something like that, and then you end if, and then at the end we return status. Why are we returning? Because again we want the status to be either true or false, and since this function helped us log in, it will give us the exact value if the user is authenticated or not. So from here, let's say if it was true, it will be brought back into this line 37, and if it is true, then this whole subsequent program will work. But let's say if this status was false and we bring status in line 37 as false, so this condition will not work, and then the program will end because the user is not authenticated. Okay, so this is the whole login part. Then if we go back, now we have to do deposit and withdraw. So let's try to do deposit. Deposit is quite simple. In deposit, what we have to do is we will ask the user to input their whatever amount they want to submit, and then we just add it into their current balance. So this is if this is their current balance, let's say 500, and we add 1000 here, so the balance will become 1500. This is all what we have to do. Simple, sum the values and update them. Okay, this would be another procedure because we are not supposed to return any value. It's just depositing. We don't need to update any of the further parts of the program. No need to return the value. So procedure, deposit, account ID as parameter, integer type, and then end procedure. Okay, output, maybe you can say welcome account ID. Again, this is optional. You don't need to do this, just a message. Then now we will ask them how many dollars maybe or whatever currency they want to submit or they want to deposit. And it should be a positive number, right? You cannot deposit zero into your account. You cannot deposit negative number into your account. So this is just an additional check. Although they did not ask you to validate this input, but it's still a very good idea to do so because we are making some sort of a banking application, so it should be fully in every way. So we'll say repeat until. So we will ask them to input some sort of a deposit amount, output, enter deposit amount, and we take input, let's say deposit amount. Okay, so they could enter anything, the user, so we need to make sure that we restrict them within the right boundary. That should be greater than zero. Until and unless it does not happen, we will keep on repeating this over and over again. And let's say once the user inputs a right deposit amount, let's say 100, so now we simply need to pick this value and we need to update the balance as per the row number and the column number. So the row number is the account ID. Let's say this was row number 2, and the column number is 1 balance, and we need to update this value. So in order to get this balance, we will get account details, row number as account ID 2, and column number 1 balance, and then we need to add the amount into it. That's what I'm going to do. So I'll say account details, account ID comma 1. Okay, so at this point what I'm trying to access is I'm trying to get the first column here, and this is the balance from the account details, but I do not know the row number. But we know from the question that row number is directly linked to the account ID, and since I know the account ID of this user, in our case we're assuming it's Tony Stark, so I just need to update this value. So I'll say account details, same value that we wrote on the left side. This is basically totaling, and then we add the deposit amount. That's it. So this is how we are updating current balance, and then we can say output. Maybe we can just output the current balance to the user. We didn't add any comments, so I'll do at the end. So this is how we deposit the money into an account. This is again very simple part. Okay, now we're only left with the withdrawal part, and withdrawal is a bit tricky. So in withdrawal, there are two rules that we have to follow. One is that we cannot exceed the withdrawal limit, and second is that if the amount we're trying to overdraft is more than, so let's write the mathematical equation here. So this is a bit of maths. So there are two conditions. If the value is that we're trying to withdraw is more than the withdrawal limit, then this is invalid. And then the other condition is that if the amount that we are trying to extract becomes greater than the overall balance and the overdraft limit. Okay, so here, if you remember, here it said the amount of money in the bank can be negative, but not more than the overdraft limit. For example, an account with an overdraft limit of 100 must have a balance that is greater than or equal to minus 100. So whatever the balance is added by the overdraft limit, or if the amount exceeds more than that, then this would not be allowed. And only when both these conditions are true, if the amount is less than the withdrawal limit and the amount is also less than the balance plus overdraft limit, only in that case will we actually withdraw the amount. And in order to withdraw the amount, we will again simply subtract the balance with the amount as we did just for depositing. So let's go ahead and write withdraw. So procedure withdraw account ID as integer, and we have end procedure. Okay, like I said, these are the two conditions. Amount should not be greater than balance plus overdraft. This is invalid. And similarly, if amount is greater than the withdrawal limit, it's also invalid. So what we can do is we can access all these values, the balance, the overdraft limit, and the withdrawal limit, because we'll be needing them. Okay, so we'll use the we'll have the withdrawal amount, let's call it amount, and we'll declare it as real, and then we'll output it, enter withdrawal amount, and we'll ask the user to input the amount. So far so simple. Then we need to extract all the values to check if they are within the certain range or not. So balance is equal to account detail. So we need to get this balance here. This is the first column in account details, account ID, comma 1. Again, same logic as before. Row number is given to us. Maybe it's Taylor Swift. So we can get the balance by using column 1, then column 2 for overdraft, and then column 3 for withdrawal. Then we have overdraft, which is account details, account ID, comma 2, and then withdrawal limit is account details, account ID, comma 3. Again, you do not need to do this. This is purely an optional step. This will just help us write the code better instead of rewriting all these values again and again. Plus, it makes the math easier. So this is balance, overdraft, and the withdrawal limit. Now, if the amount is more than the withdrawal limit, that means it is invalid. So first one, and the second one, if the amount is more than the balance added with overdraft, then that is also invalid. So we just need to do this. If amount that you're trying to withdraw is more than the withdrawal limit, then you will output amount can't exceed withdrawal limit. Okay, else if the amount is more than your balance plus overdraft, then you will again output amount can't exceed overdraft limit, and we can end if here. All right, so what we did here is we simply got the values from the array, and we are checking if the current amount that we want to withdraw, let's say we want to withdraw 500. Okay, let's say we're looking at Harry Potter and you want to withdraw 600. So 600 is not allowed in the withdrawal limit, right? This is more than that. So this would produce an error. Amount cannot exceed withdrawal limit. And similarly, the overdraft limit and the withdrawal limit is 800. And if I try to balance and overdraft limit is, this should be 350. So if I input 600, so since 600 is more than 350, again, this will not be allowed. And then it will say it cannot exceed the overdraft limit. Okay, if both of them are not the case, now we need to go for the actual proper values that the user inputs that would be allowed by the program, and on which you'll be able to actually withdraw the amount. So for that, the condition would be if amount, so it will be opposite of these both conditions. So if amount is less than or equal to the withdrawal limit, and the amount is less than equal to balance plus overdraft. Okay, so exact opposite of these two conditions. Now these are the right circumstances for a withdrawal to be done. Okay, if both of them are correct, now we will allow the user to make a withdrawal. And for withdrawal, what we'll do is we'll just simply subtract the value from their active balance. So let's say we have Edward Ehrlich here. So if they want to extract maybe 200 from their account, so they'll be left with 300 balance. That is what we have to do. And again, as we did for the deposit, we'll do the same thing again. We'll access the column and the specific value. In our case, that would be account details, account ID, comma 1. Again, why is this one? Because we're looking at the balance for Edward. And then this would be account details, account ID 1, comma 1. Okay, so this is literally the same thing, because we have to update the value. Minus amount, we are subtracting because we have to reduce the value from the balance. And then I'll output withdrawal of, comma, maybe amount successful. Okay, this is just again additional for the user to show them on the screen. And if you want to show the new balance now, so you can either just output it like this, or since we have the balance procedure here, display, we can simply call the display. It will just literally output your current balance, and it will output the current balance on the screen. So you can do it in both ways. But since we already have a procedure for that, we can simply call it display. But this is again not necessary, it's purely an optional step. And with this, I believe we are done with everything. Check the account ID. So we are done with the validation part. We have shown the menu, and we have made all the procedures, and that's pretty much it. So let's say if the user inputs status was true and the user inputs 4 on the first choice, so it's not equal to 1, not equal to 2, not equal to 3, and it becomes 4, so we end if, and then maybe we can say just output program ended, something like this. And that's it for the whole program. Thank you.